Dak Prescott 1-3 in the playoffs. Mike McCarthy hasn't won a playoff game. Shady, why you laugh?
It's my favorite segment of the day. I'm sorry. I can't wait. No, go.
Wait, no, I'm interested. Why can't you wait?
He knows why.
I'm baffled. I'm confused.
No, you funny. You talking about Dak has a rocky start. It's like he always has a rocky start. Pick six.
Actually, I was going to say he had a rocky everything.
He had a rocky game.
Everything.
I was being kind. Dave Helman, you might not be as kind. You covered the Dallas Cowboys for 10 years. You know this team as well as anybody. Who's under more pressure, Dak Prescott or Mike McCarthy on Monday?
I mean, obviously the answer can be both. I'm not trying to say somebody doesn't have pressure, but I think it's Mike McCarthy, and I don't think it's that close because at the end of the day, Mike McCarthy is the one whose job is potentially on the line. Mike McCarthy is the guy that is easy to get rid of. On top of that, this is 2 years in a row. Let's say they lose. This would be 2 years in a row. They win 12 games. Like 12 wins for me is like the mark of a contender. Like you can't, it's hard to win. Maybe you get into the playoffs with 9, 10 wins. If you win 12 games,
you're good.
You're good. You should be.
Mm-hmm.
And so 2 seasons of 12 wins and you can't get over the first hump in a postseason that involves 3, if not 4 playoff wins. What does that say? And then it becomes a trend. Not only could the owner potentially be mad at you, could potentially think you're not the guy, but what does that say to your team? Like at what point does doubt start to creep in, or even halfway through next season? It's like, yeah, we're 6-1, but what does that mean if we've lost 2 wildcard games in a row? At the end of the day, like, what's going to happen to Dak Prescott if they lose this game? Is he going to catch hell? Are people going to be mean to him on TV? That already happens. Are people going to say he can't win the big game? That already happens. Like, what is going to happen to Dak other than what he's already used to? And they can't cut him. I guess they could trade him, but moving a $40 million quarterback is hard as hell to do. Dak's going to be fine. Mike McCarthy's the one with more stuff to worry about.
Don't you think, Joy, as we come to you, don't you think, Dave, there will be a cementing of Dak's legacy, at least in the here and now? If he goes 1-4 in the playoffs, the cap on how Dak will be remembered will be very shallow. Think about Tony Romo. I watched Tony Romo because I grew up in Dallas, Texas. So I watched Troy Aikman. I watched me some Quincy Carter. I watched Drew Henson. And then I watched me some Tony Romo. I think I watched Vinny Testaverde, too, in there somewhere. If Dak Prescott goes 1-4, don't you think there will be a cap is like, okay, he was good for us, but he surely wasn't great.
Well, I mean, his career doesn't end when this game is over. Like again, he's under contract for multiple more years. The very earliest they could get away from him is after next year. So yeah, like people are going to be down on him. He's going to catch hell. The vast majority of Cowboy fans and probably NFL fans are going to be out on him as any sort of significant quarterback. But he has the chance to prove them wrong. Dak Prescott's not 30 yet. I think the difference between him and Tony Romo came into the starting role as a much older player. Like he was in his prime when he got the job. And then by the time he kind of got that reputation as a guy that can't win the big one, he was already getting on the wrong side of his 30s. Dak Prescott isn't 30 yet. That's what happens when you take over the starting job as a rookie. So, yeah, it'll be bad. And for people like me who think he's a good quarterback, it'll be a rough offseason. But he's going to be fine in the long run, and he'll have plenty more opportunities to prove that that's not who he is.
Joy, where do you stand? More pressure, Dak or McCarthy?
I mean, as far as who's going to lose their job goes, it's obviously McCarthy because you can't fire Dak Prescott. But I wouldn't go as far as to say that there's more pressure on him because how the game goes will determine that. If the Cowboys look a mess, if they're giving up penalties, if there's multiple fumbles, if they look terrible, which I don't anticipate that they will, but entirely possible.
It is the Cowboys.
If they look terrible, then I think it will be on Mike McCarthy. But if Dak looks terrible, that's not going to be on Mike McCarthy. That I don't believe. Because as a whole, this year, the Cowboys have been good. They are 12-4. They are in the playoffs. They were in contention for the division in the last week of the season. And they went 4-1 without Dak Prescott. Mike McCarthy did. Dak had nothing to do with that. So I think you can look at the Cowboys and Dak's, turnover struggles or games that he's been bad in this season and separate that from Mike McCarthy as being the coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Of course, this is assuming that we're having a rational conversation about the Dallas Cowboys, which never happens. So
the next one will be the first one.
I'm spinning a fantasy right now, right? But I think you can separate the two situations. So from that perspective, I think it is on Dak. I disagree with you. If Dak looks bad in this game, if he has multiple turnovers and they end up losing to, let's be honest, even though it's Tom Brady, an inferior opponent.
A middling
the Bucs are not as good as the Cowboys. They haven't been all season long. The only reason anybody has any faith in the Cowboys or in the Bucs in this game is because the Cowboys.
Oh, the Cowboys.
Yes,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
it's Tom Brady. So from that perspective, I think things could go badly for Dak if he ends up looking terrible. Like this next season for him, there will be questions about the Cowboys possibly moving on if he looks bad in this game.
LeSean McCoy, I hear you highlighting something profusely. I'm curious as to what it is.
Dak. It's Dak Prescott. Jason Garrett, right? He was there for 10 seasons?
9 or 10.
Three playoff wins?
No, not that many. No, he had 1, 2.
Oh, 3 playoff appearances, right? He's been there 3 times. I know something like that.
Yeah.
And they kept him, right? So I would say the pressure has to be on Dak. If we watch this game, because they show you a coach that played there for a long time, wasn't getting to the playoffs, but they kept him around, right? And granted, McCarthy, he actually won a Super Bowl. He's been there.
Right.
So let's say he doesn't get to the playoffs, I don't know, 10 years, right? Same as Garrett. It's Dak Prescott because the way he's been playing, it all rides on him. It really does. Like, for you to only play 12 games, you lead the league in interceptions, right? This guy has, 3 pick six in the last 4 games. It's a throw a pick six, right? It's like you have to have like a terrible read. Because normally you throw a pick that somebody's there to tackle him. You must have a bad read. So my thing with Dak Prescott is this. You said he has 2 years left on his contract? Basically, a year and a half, year and a half.
Yeah.
And we see this all the time, right? You play bad in the playoffs. Okay, now the coaches, we're looking for his replacement. Now, he has a money gap, so we can't get rid of him that year, but your replacement is in their mind, right? They get the replacement. As the year goes on, he sits. That next year, they get rid of him. It happens all the time. So if Dak Prescott goes in this playoffs and he's playing the same way we've been seeing the last 4 games, all the last 12 games he's played, it's his fault they're going to lose. You can't throw picks in the playoffs. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are a struggling team. They're up and down. You get the Tom Brady 400 yards, or you get the Tom Brady getting sacked 4 times for 200 yards, right? They go out there and they play bad against Tampa and they lose this game. Dak Prescott, it's on him.
Dave, I do think Shady's making a point I hadn't yet thought of.
He always does.
He's making a point I hadn't thought of. The AFC playoff picture, y'all do realize Patrick Mahomes is the oldest quarterback at 27 years of age in the AFC playoffs.
Okay.
You have Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, and Tua Tagovailoa. Those are the day one starters for those teams. So while Dak is in theory young, he's not actually young anymore in the NFL. No. And many younger quarterbacks have bypassed him. Do you not think there is a point where if the Cowboys lose again, Dak Prescott goes 1-4 in the playoffs as a starter for the Dallas Cowboys, eventually, even you, Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, Will McClay, Cowboys fans have to look up and say, you know what? There are a lot better quarterbacks that are younger than Dak and better than Dak, and we have a quarterback that's getting older and getting surpassed.
More
Don't
expensive.
you think that will bring forth some pressure?
Yeah, and I mean, like I said,
question.
it's going to be a rough offseason. The reason I think the pressure is lessened is like that's all cool conversation, and it's fair. It's totally fair, especially for the price that Dak costs. But he's not getting cut this year. Like he will get to run this back. He's not getting like he's the quarterback of the Cowboys at least until this time next year. If I had to guess, probably longer than that. And for that matter, like this, I mean, this is my favorite stuff to talk about because this is team building. Because most of those guys that you just mentioned, where were they drafted? They were drafted at the top of the draft.
Like first rounders.
You're talking about generational type of prospects, whether it's the top 5 guys. I mean, Lamar is the outlier there, and he was drafted at the end of the first round. The Cowboys, say whatever you want about them, very rarely are they terrible. The Cowboys feed off attention. They want to be in the limelight. They're not ever going to take a season off where they're not in the conversation to land a Joe Burrow or a Justin Herbert or any of those types of guys. So I think it's an interesting dilemma of like, okay, if that's the type of quarterback that you want, then the bottom has to drop out on your team the way that we've never seen it happen to the Cowboys. And so I think that it creates an interesting juxtaposition.
And I disagree because I think that the leash gets shorter. If he goes there and plays bad, every game next year, they're gonna be looking at it like, okay, every little mistake is a bigger thing now, every time. And then their last 2 franchise quarterbacks wasn't first-round picks, second-round picks.
Yeah, they got incredibly lucky. Like how
They got lucky twice.
Yes.
So
how many quarterbacks weren't drafted in the first round that went on to be great?
This is the thing, though. With these GMs, they think they're so smart. We did it once. We do it again. We did it twice. We can do it again. We can do it 3 times, we'll do it again. And you can make some trades and get up there and get you a top pick.
I guess the question, though, is, and Joy, I'm interested in your thoughts on this. How much of it was luck versus how much of it was the organizational structure? Like, the Cowboys, like Dave says, will always be good. They might not necessarily be great, but is it hard to be that good when, remember, Tony Romo even had Zach Martin.
Come on.
He had DeMarco Murray. He had Travis Frederick. He had Tyron Smith. He had Jason Witten. He had Dez Bryant. He had Cole Beasley. How much?
And he was better, too.
How much luck is involved? Like, doesn't there come a point where it's like, you know what? Maybe this is just the Cowboys mantra. I don't really know what I'm asking, but I'm saying something.
No, like you're asking, well, first of all, what you're saying is they don't need a number 1 pick in order to move on from
yes,
which is what Shady is saying.
Yes.
Because they have done this multiple times, they don't believe they need a number 1 pick. They don't believe they need to let the bottom fall out to get a replacement.
Yeah, the bottom fall out. Yeah.
Which they won't.
Okay.
They have too much talent on the roster to be that bad anyway. They would, at the very least, be in the middle in purgatory, which is the worst place to be. So they'll never be in that space anyway. So that's, I believe.
Yes, that's what I'm getting at.
What you're saying.
That's what I'm getting at.
But to that space, that's what puts pressure on Dak because they feel like they can do that because they have done it. I don't really like luck. Like there's luck involved and everything, but it's also a lot of work.
And
like research and time and energy.
A lot of talent.
And all those things too. And then you need a little sprinkle of luck also. But there's a base for these things as well. Now, I don't love the idea of just going out there and finding somebody in the 3rd round and thinking that they're going to be, or 4th round, 5th round, thinking they're going to be your franchise quarterback.
Second round?
I mean,
It's been done.
It has been done.
Come on. He's from New Orleans.
They talk about this with the Packers all the time too, because the Packers have the same philosophy. I mean, we've had a first ballot Hall of Famer for the last 30 years. How we can do no wrong in these situations until you do. And we talk about this with the Ravens and the Eagles. And sometimes it works, and sometimes you're.
The year the Cowboys drafted Dak Prescott, Jerry Jones spent 48 hours up until the day of the pick complaining that he wished that he had traded up to get Paxton Lynch, the Memphis quarterback who went on to have a completely forgettable career for the Denver Broncos.
But somebody stepped in and kept him from doing that.
Oh,
right?
Sure, they did.
That's
Okay.
a good point.
There you go. Good point, Joy.
That is the mindset of the decision makers. If you want to trust, and don't come at me about Tony Romo, because if you're not even willing to spend a 7th round pick on a guy, that's blind luck. I don't care. That's blind luck. You can't tell me how much you liked a guy that you wouldn't even draft. So if you like your odds, seriously, let's think about guys drafted outside the top 40 who went on to like meaningful NFL careers in recent history. It's like Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott, Tony Romo. So
same team, back to back. That's the thing, though. Back to back.
If they want to try their luck with it again,
But I
more
guess,
power to
Dave,
them.
real quick,
I don't think it's a good idea.
Real quick, don't you think that Will McClay, essentially the acting general manager of the Dallas Cowboys, a name that you all need to familiarize yourselves with, don't you think he keeps the roster for the Cowboys offensively talented enough, and the core of the roster, he builds it inside out. He starts with offensive linemen. Don't you think it is talented enough that a 4th round pick at quarterback could come in and do noise? Cooper Rush was 4-1. Statistically, the Cowboys were not the same. I am not saying that. Dak was definitely better statistically. But don't you think Will McClay is good enough at his job to keep the roster steady enough to a 4th, 5th, 6th, 3rd round pick could come in and win? They always have.
Not consistently, no. I mean, we like Cooper Rush played great. You're right. I mean, they were mid-20s, late 20s on offense in everything. And then they got Dak back and immediately jumped back into the top 5. What happened when they played a playoff contender when Cooper Rush was there?
The Bengals, they won.
Oh, that's a good one. That you got me there.
My boy, it's pressure on you today.
And on top of that, I'll come back on the other side of that as well, and just point out that this roster. I mean, this is the NFL. This applies for everybody. Like this roster. You love to recite the names on the 2016 roster. Like Zach Martin is getting up there in age. Tyron Smith is on the last legs of his career. DeMarcus Lawrence has been playing on this team for 9 years. Like they're going to be talented. I mean, they have Micah, they have CD.
All these people. Yep.
I get it, but like all of that stuff cycles out. Like we've talked about this off the air a million times. Like look at the Cowboys' offensive talent right now, and really tell me how it stacks up compared to some of the other contenders.
I like it.
It's a phenomenal point.
Subscribe here to get the latest from Speak, and go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.